Greetings. There's a topic that I haven't really got into, and I figure, well, I got some time this morning. It's not too hot yet. It's supposed to get to 32 degrees here today. For Americans, that's Celsius, not Fahrenheit. Um, just throwing that out there. Cursed teams. I don't believe in curses. I don't. Chicago Cubs. They're a cursed franchise. No, the Chicago Cubs have just had some really, really, really bad management for a really long time. And now they're finally winning, and they look like they might have a shot at a World Series. Am I betting on it? I've been watching the Cubs the last 30 years. I'm not betting on it. Am I cheering for it? Of course. I've got Cubs T-shirts, and I'd have a Cubs jersey if I could find one locally. But no, I'm not betting on it. I don't really believe in curses. I believe in poorly managed franchises. It's sort of like how Vancouver never won a cup. It's not a curse. Canada hasn't won a cup since '93. It's not a curse. So I'm going to take a look at franchises and look back at the years they could have. I'm going to start with Washington. All right. Now I'm going through this, which is last year's guide and record book, because this year's isn't out yet. So anybody who says that's not current, well, it's not current because the new one's not out. But I'm pretty sure I can remember what happened this past season. If I can't, just go back and look at my old videos, because I've been doing videos since the start of this past season's playoffs. On hockey, anyway. Washington's an interesting case because they were horrible their first year. 7 wins at home, 1 win on the road. That 1 win on the road, they carried a garbage can around the ice like it was the Stanley Cup because they were so proud of themselves. And because they knew, how bad they were. It's good to have a sense of humor. You have to when your team has got 21 points for the season. But they made gradual improvements. And then they came up to 83-84. They were second in the Patrick division with 101 points. They lost the division final, so they made the second round. The following season, again, 101 points, second in the Patrick, so they had home ice advantage. They lost the first round. The next season, they got 107 points, second in the Patrick. They lost in the second round. The following season, 86 points, still second in the Patrick. They lost in the first round. The following season, 85 points, still second in the Patrick division. They lost in the second round. The following season, 92 points. They finished first in the Patrick. They lost in the first round. And, alright, I'm only counting when they had home ice. In 92, they had home ice with 98 points. They lost in the first round. 93, they had home ice with 93 points. They lost in the first round. We then switch over to the conference, done the way it's done now. And their first season, they finished third in the East because the Atlantic Division sucked, and they lost in the second round. Then it was a strike-shortened season where they finished sixth in the East. They lost in the first round. The following season, they were fourth or seventh in the East again. They lost in the first round, out of the playoffs. They managed in '98 to make the Stanley Cup final. Got slaughtered by Detroit there. And then they missed the playoffs on either side of that season. And then in 2000, they got 102 points, first in the Southeast Division, lost the first round. The year after that, they were first in the Southeast, they lost in the first round. Then they missed the playoffs. Then they were sixth in the East, they lost in the first round. Then they missed the playoffs for 3 years, 4 if you include the season that didn't happen in 04-05. In 07-08, thanks to this kid named Ovechkin, they finished first in the Southeast, lost in the first round. The following season, 108 points, lost in the second round. The following season, 121 points and a President's Trophy, lost in the first round. The following season, 107 points, first in the East, lost in the second round. 2012, 92 points, seventh in the East, lost in the second round. Strike-shortened season, finished third in the East, lost in the first round. And then in 2015 and 2016, they won their division and the conference last year overall. Or no, they were President's Trophy winners last year. Lost in the second round, and the year before that they lost in the second round. So Washington has had plenty of opportunities. This is why at the start of last year's playoffs I said they're the Capitals. Vancouver. This is, honestly, the team was a joke up until 92. I'm including 82 because they had 77 points in 80 games. They weren't a very good team. They were very good at home, 20 wins, 8 losses, and 12 ties. On the road, 10 wins, 25 losses, 7 ties. So they had home ice in the first 3 rounds. They get to the final. They're playing the New York Islanders, a juggernaut, and they have to start on the road, so they got killed. So that was a mirage. 92, they won the Smythe Division, lost in the second round. The following season, they got 101 points. They had 96 points first time. 101 points next season, they lost in the second round. They started falling. They fell to 7th in the West and lost the final. So that Stanley Cup final run was almost a mirage too, because the team actually didn't play very well during the regular season. 95, they were already falling at that point. 6th in the West, they lost the second round. 96, yeah, they were already sub 500. So I'm just going to leave that because they were overmatched. They had a comeback in 2001 of sorts, 90 points, 8th in the West, lost in the first round. 2002, 8th in the West again, lost in the first round. 2003, 104 points, 4th in the West, lost in the second round. 2004, 101 points, lost in the first round. That was the Bertuzzi punch year. Then they missed the playoffs after the lockout. 2007, 105 points, 3rd in the West, lost in the second round. 2008, out of the playoffs. 2009, 100 points, 3rd in the West, lost in the second round. 2010, 103 points, lost in the second round. 2011, lost the final, and they were the President's Trophy winners that year. There's a pattern there. And then the following season, they were President's Trophy winners again, 111 points, although it was a mirage that second year. They weren't as good. And they lost in the first round to the Kings. And then 2015, I don't know if you'd qualify them as a contender, but they were 5th in the West, and they lost in the first round. 101 points. Getting 100 points used to be an actual accomplishment. Now, Toronto, they've won the Cup before, but it was 67. The funny thing is, for everybody bitching and complaining about how bad they are and for how bad they've been, they honestly had some good seasons in the 70s. I mean, in 78, they had 92 points. They were 3rd in the Adams. They lost the semifinal. So, I mean, that's something. Second round. They were in the conference finals in 93 and 94. They had 99 points and 98 points, respectively. In 2000, they had 100 points. They were 3rd in the East. They lost the second round. 2001, they had 90 points, 7th in the East, lost the second round. They were in the conference final in 2002 with 100 points, where they lost. Lost the first round the year after that, and then the year before the lockout, they made the second round with 103 points. So, I mean, after the lockout, it's been a gong show. But when people say Toronto's always been bad, they're people who don't follow history. Toronto's not always been bad. They just haven't quite been a contender. Tampa, we won't touch on Tampa. San Jose, they're still too young to really qualify as cursed. St. Louis, they made the Stanley Cup final their first 3 years of existence, which is due to the fact they were in the West, and the West sucked. The only original 6 team that played in the West was Chicago, and Chicago in the West, they sucked as well in the late 60s. So if Stan Mikita wants to argue with me about that, he can contact me through my channel. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. And then St. Louis from there on, 81, they had 107 points. They were 1st in the Smythe. They lost the quarterfinal. There was a lot of making the playoffs. I mean, they've made the playoffs for decades, but people forget in the 80s making the playoffs was really fucking easy. You just had to basically make sure you had a goaltender and that all of your players had all their limbs. You made the playoffs. It was 16 out of 21 teams. It wasn't difficult. 85, 86 points, 1st in the Norris. Lost the second round. They were sub 500 there. 91, they had 105 points, 2nd in the Norris. They lost the division final, so the second round. In 2000, they were 114th, 114 points first in the West. I'm pretty sure they had the President's Trophy that year. They lost the first round. 2001, 103 points. They lost the conference final that year. And then recent history, 2012, they lost the second round in that season with 109 points. Strike shortened season, they had 60 points. They lost the first round. 14, 15, and 16. They've had over 100 points each season. They lost the first round twice, and this past season they lost in the second. So when people talk about, or no, it was the third round, they lost in the conference final. The Blues are making progress, but I still qualify them as kind of a cursed franchise. Philly, it hasn't been long enough since they won the Cup for me to say they're cursed. Ottawa hasn't been in the league long enough. The Rangers have won Stanley Cup since 1940. The 1940 chant was what was going on until 94. Anytime the Rangers blew a series and lost, the crowd would start chanting 1940, clap, 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 clap. Like it was fun to chant it. I chanted it a few times when they got knocked out in the playoffs. But seeing that one Stanley Cup, I mean, look at that. The Stanley Cup season is highlighted in bold. And it's almost sadder to have one season highlighted in bold in the last, we're up to frickin' 75 years. Holy shit. That's not fun. So for Rangers fans, it can't be good to see the team potentially going into a rebuild. It's one cup win in 75 years. The Islanders in the 80s, Devils aren't even close. Nashville hasn't been around long enough. Montreal, there's no curse of Patrick Roy. It's a curse of Ron Corey, man. Minnesota hasn't been around long enough. Kings, they recently won the Cup. They broke their curse. Florida hasn't been around long enough. Edmonton's not cursed. They were run so poorly for so long. The idea was that if it was a former Oiler, then they were God. So we'll let them run the team because they won Stanley Cups as players. That's not how you measure who's going to be a good manager or a coach. Detroit's not cursed. Dallas isn't cursed. Columbus, it'd be hard to find a season where they were predicted to do anything. Colorado's not cursed either. Chicago, they broke their curse by winning 3 Stanley Cups in 5 years. That's how you do it, or 6 years. Carolina, no, they've got that one cup win in there. Calgary, they have a cup win. Haven't really been cursed since then. They went through, Calgary and a lot of the small market teams went through the mid-90s where the Canadian dollar was extremely low. We had just lost Quebec and Winnipeg, and there were rumblings that Calgary and Vancouver could be on the block as well, and Edmonton, of course. I remember when Hartford became Carolina and Quebec became Colorado, and they asked Gary Bettman. They said, "What do you think the problem is?" And he said, "It's 3 letters, WHA." And I thought, wow, you insensitive prick. You know the Oilers are still in the league, right? You just freaked out their entire fan base, right? Buffalo. Yeah, Buffalo's kind of sort of cursed. Now, there's still talk about how the first year they got Gilbert Perreault and Vancouver got Dale Talon. That was how the expansion draft happened, or the entry draft the first year, and that defined the franchises. Buffalo had the French connection, and this exciting team, right? In '75, they finished first in the Adams. They lost in the final, 113 points. 105 points they lost in the quarterfinal. 104 points they lost in the quarterfinal. 105 points they lost in the quarterfinal. 88 points they lost in the preliminary round. 110 points they lost the semifinal. 99 points they lost the quarterfinal. 93 points they lost the semifinal. Not 89 points they lost the division final, so that's the second round. 103 points they lost the division semifinal, first round. 90 points lost the first round as well, and then they fell out of the playoffs. So that is the successful franchise from the 1970 expansion. That's the successful franchise. 1 final appearance. And a bunch of almosts and maybes. Very good regular season results, but in the playoffs you'd run into Philly, or Montreal, and that would end it. So they were competitive, but I wouldn't say they were favorites. In 1990, they had 98 points, second in the Adams. They lost the division semifinals, so second round. In 94, they had 95 points, sixth in the East, lost the conference quarterfinal. So first round. Strike shortened season, they lost the first round. 92 points in 97, they lost in the second round. It's hard to find a really good season for Buffalo, to be honest, until 06. They lost the conference final with 110 points. 07, they lost the conference final with 113 points. They were President's Trophy winners that year. A couple of 90-point seasons out of the playoffs. Then they had 100 points in 2010, and they lost in the first round. 96 points the year after, and they lost in the first round. Buffalo has been mismanaged, and they haven't won a cup because mismanagement in the 70s and 80s, they existed during the same time period as the Montreal Dynasty and the Broad Street Bullies, and that's just what it is. Boston, no curse. They had a recent Stanley Cup. Arizona, it would be hard for me to say anything about Arizona. When they were in Winnipeg, they were a small market team. And stop me if you've heard that before. But when they went to Arizona, it wasn't small market, but it was small beans. So you go from a small city to a bigger city, but you go from a city that loves hockey to a city that doesn't understand or really care about hockey in the beginning. Now, what Arizona's become is a city that still, the casual population doesn't seem to care about hockey. There's some very passionate fans in the Arizona area. I mean, whether it's Phoenix, Tucson, wherever, because I don't know where the team's going to play next, but because I don't think they're going to stay in Glendale. But the casual fan still doesn't care, and it still leaves them as a small market team, not because of the market itself, but because of the fan base. So it's hard for me to compare them to other teams. Yes, Buffalo's a small market too. Wait a sec. Buffalo also has had really passionate fan bases and sellouts, and they've had some fantastic crowds and the American dollar. So they're Winnipeg with an American dollar, and they're still alive because they're Winnipeg with an American dollar. If Buffalo was north of the Canadian border, there's no way in hell Buffalo would have kept their team through the 90s. No chance. And even the early 2000s. If the 90s didn't take them out, the early 2000s would have. But for me, Arizona / Winnipeg, they were never really, really good either. Now, I remember in the mid-'80s with Dale Hawerchuk, and some of the players they had were fantastic. And then eventually, too, with Phil Housley later on. The problem that Winnipeg had was they existed in the same division as Calgary and Edmonton. And Edmonton was a dynasty, and Calgary was close to being a dynasty because they had to keep competing with the guys up north. Winnipeg just didn't have that. Winnipeg never had that star quality. And when Solani came in, they had the star quality. They just didn't have the team to surround him with, and then they didn't have the money to even pay Solani if they wanted to keep him. Like, it just got uglier for Winnipeg. So it's hard for me to qualify Arizona as cursed when I feel like they're running the same race as the other teams, but they get out of the starting blocks 5 seconds after. So they're starting with a deficiency. They're starting from behind. What Arizona's building now with Domi, Duclair, and Dvorak, and some of these players, I'm really impressed. Okay, I think this could be the group that maybe doesn't lead Arizona to the promised land, but at least makes them a contender. But I can't qualify them as cursed. And then we get to Anaheim, and of course Anaheim won the Cup in 07 through bullying tactics, but they won it, and I can't qualify them as cursed either. So that's my tour of the NHL franchises that people say are cursed. There is no curse. There's mismanagement. There's teams that choke. when you go back to Washington, almost every single case where they're a home ice team and they lose in the first or second round, they just didn't have the finish. They could not finish off the teams they were supposed to finish. That was the defining character of the Washington Capitals in the 80s. Oh, they've got a team down? Doesn't matter, they're going to come back. Who are they against? Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh's coming back. Washington had some very good teams in the 80s. Washington had some very solid teams in the 90s. They just could not finish when they needed to. They couldn't finish it. And St. Louis has had that problem as well. I wouldn't qualify Buffalo that way. Again, Buffalo was just against competition that was better than they were, and that's not their fault. But yeah, it's not easy winning that first Stanley Cup. And then when you win that first Stanley Cup, you find out it's not easy winning any Stanley Cup. So when a team wins it, it is an impressive feat. So hopefully, this coming season, one of those teams proves us wrong. Now, if I had to be a betting man, I would say Washington can't fail all the time. I'm cautiously leaning towards Washington as the team that I think will win the Stanley Cup this year, because eventually the Kings broke through. And this is about the same timeline for Washington. They have to eventually break through. St. Louis, I'm convinced St. Louis will just choke away any hopes they ever have forever. I think this past season was their best hope, and I think Chicago comes back stronger this year, and I think St. Louis's hopes are dashed. Because St. Louis is weaker, and I think Chicago's going to be better. So, but that's me. And they're the Capitals. So we'll see which one rolls out. The team that should win it, or that they're the Capitals. All right, well, thanks for watching. It's going to be scorching, stinking, horrible hot today. So I will probably not want to venture too far outside the home. And I will probably be able to throw together some stuff for you good people. But curses do not exist in sports, just bad management. So next time you hear about the GOAT curse in Chicago, or, the Babe Ruth curse I heard about with the Red Sox for ages. It wasn't a curse. They just traded Babe Ruth. That's stupidity. It's not a curse. It's stupid. So, when that ball went through Bill Buckner's legs, that wasn't a curse. That was Buckner unable to play a very routine ball. And that's not why they lost the World Series. That wasn't Game 7. It was Game 6. Everybody seems to remember that as if, oh, that's what lost the whole World Series. No. Now, should the Red Sox have won that game and won the World Series? Yeah, they were up 3-2, and that would have won the World Series. They lost Game 7, and Buckner didn't let the ball go through his legs. The entire Boston Red Sox choked the game away. The entire Red Sox team sucked in Game 7. So everybody remembers Buckner, the Buckner. That wasn't the finish of that series. That wasn't the Mets winning the World Series right there. The Mets winning the World Series, it just still makes me want to choke. I didn't like Dwight Gooden. I didn't like Darryl Strawberry. Anyways, that's baseball. That's totally different. But yeah, I don't believe in curses in sports. Just bad management. And teams just not able to finish it out. That's what you're seeing. So, anyways, any comments below on who you think of the teams that I went through? Which one breaks the curse first? Am I right about the Capitals? Is it the Kings? Oh, they already broke their curse. I was so used to the Kings being the team that I felt were kind of cursed to never win it. I put the Kings and the Blues in that same category. The Canucks, I don't even worry about the Canucks. Of course, the Canucks aren't going to win it. It's not even for discussion. Of course, they're never going to win the Stanley Cup. I always laugh when Canucks fans say, "Oh, we're going to, we're Cup contenders. Oh, someday we're going to win the Cup." And it's like, oh, it's like that little kid, with a soapbox racer. I'm going to be in the F1 someday. Oh, that's so cute. He thinks he's another Louis Hamilton. He's not even Dougie Hamilton. Or Scott Hamilton. He's not a Hamilton at all. But we'll lie to him and say, oh, that's cute. That's what Canucks fans remind me of. And the racer's got 3 wheels out of 4. That's just me. I don't think... I honestly, whenever anybody asks me which team in Canada is going to win the Cup first, I go, nobody. But that's another video. That's something completely different that I'll talk about at another time. And no, it's not a conspiracy. It's just a feeling I get from every Canadian franchise. So I guess we'll see, whether I'm right. If I had to pick over the next 5 years, I'd say I don't see any Canadian team winning the cup. But that's me. Anyways, enjoy your day, and I will talk to you all later.